The paradox of choice. Imagine, if you will, a quiet stroll into an ice cream shop. You're in the mood for something sweet, something comforting. The small, familiar selection you know so well is waiting for you. But today, there's something different. Instead of just 5 or 6 options, there are 50. Chocolate, vanilla, pistachio, salted caramel, mango sorbet, rocky road, and many more. At first, you feel a flutter of excitement, but as you stand there, contemplating, something changes. The thrill fades as you start to feel the weight of all those choices. What if you choose pistachio, but you miss out on the salted caramel? What if rocky road would have been just right? A decision that should have been light and joyful turns into something more overwhelming. This, my dear, is the paradox of choice. It's the idea that while having more options may seem better, it can actually leave us feeling more anxious, less satisfied, and sometimes even unhappy. It's a concept that quietly challenges one of the foundational beliefs of modern life, that more choices always mean more freedom, more happiness. Psychologist Barry Schwartz brought this paradox to light. He suggested that when faced with an abundance of choices, we become paralyzed. We struggle to make a decision at all. Have you ever spent what feels like hours scrolling through a streaming platform, unable to choose a movie, only to return to something familiar? It's easy to get lost in the endless options, unsure of which one might be the perfect choice. The more choices we have, the harder it becomes to decide. And with every option, we wonder, what if I miss something better? But the paradox doesn't stop at indecision. It lingers, affecting how we feel after we've made a choice. Think back to the ice cream shop. You finally settle on salted caramel, but as you savor the first bite, a thought creeps in. What if pistachio would have been better? Even though the salted caramel is delicious. The nagging thought of what you might have missed dulls the enjoyment. Just a little. This feeling, known as post-decision regret, is a key way the paradox of choice diminishes our happiness. One reason for this is opportunity cost. Every time we make a choice, we're also choosing not to do something else. When there are just a few options, the cost of what we didn't choose feels small. But when the options are vast, dozens, maybe even hundreds, the feeling of loss becomes larger. We become hyper-aware of the choices we didn't make, making it harder to fully embrace the option we did choose. Another factor at play is our expectations. When we have more choices, we expect more. If there are only 3 flavors of ice cream, we might be content with any one of them. But when the menu stretches into the dozens, we begin searching for the perfect flavor, the one that will be extraordinary. And when the salted caramel doesn't meet that unattainable expectation, we feel disappointed. Not because it wasn't good, but because it wasn't perfect. The paradox of choice reveals a truth. Having more options doesn't just offer more freedom. It opens up more space for disappointment. Interestingly, the paradox doesn't affect everyone the same way. Some people, known as maximizers, feel an intense drive to find the absolute best option. They'll research and compare, seeking the perfect choice. While this thoroughness can be helpful, it often leads to stress. Maximizers are constantly worried about whether they made the right decision, which leaves them feeling unsatisfied even after they've chosen. On the other hand, satisficers approach decisions differently. They aim for good enough. They make choices quickly without agonizing over what they might have missed. This ability to move on without second guessing often leads to greater happiness and peace of mind. The paradox of choice has deep implications for our lives. In today's world, we are surrounded by an endless array of options: what to eat, where to live, who to love, what career to pursue. On the surface, this abundance of choice seems like a gift, a symbol of freedom. But in truth, it can lead to something called decision fatigue, a state where the effort of choosing wears us down, making it harder to make good decisions. So how can we navigate this paradox? One approach is to embrace the idea of good enough. Instead of seeking perfection, we can learn to appreciate the choices we've made and let go of what we didn't choose. Another helpful strategy is to limit the number of options we consider. For instance, rather than scrolling endlessly through streaming choices, we could pick the first 5 that catch our eye. By simplifying our decision-making, we reduce stress and increase our satisfaction. The paradox of choice teaches us a profound lesson about happiness. True contentment doesn't come from having endless options. It comes from being present and content with the choices we've made. It reminds us that freedom isn't about having infinite possibilities. It's about having the clarity and confidence to make choices without regret. In the end, the paradox of choice isn't just about ice cream or movies. It's a reflection of how we navigate the complexities of modern life. It asks us to rethink what freedom and happiness truly mean, and to understand that sometimes less really is more. By grasping the truth of this paradox, we can make better decisions, find peace, and live more fulfilling lives. The Crocodile Paradox. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine this. Your child has been taken by a crocodile. You stand at the edge of a peaceful river, but inside, your heart races, your breath shallow and quick. The crocodile locks eyes with you, cold, unblinking, and says, "I will return your child if and only if you can correctly guess what I will do next." In that moment, time seems to freeze. You realize this isn't just a life or death situation. It's a puzzle, a trap woven from the threads of logic itself. No matter how you answer, you're caught in a paradox, a dilemma that has puzzled thinkers for centuries. This is more than just a story about a predator and its prey. It's a deep dive into knowledge, logic, and the very limits of certainty. Let's slowly unravel this tangled web of reasoning.
You have 2 possible answers. The first scenario goes like this. You predict that the crocodile will return your child. If the crocodile intends to return your child, your prediction is right, and the crocodile fulfills its promise. Everything seems to align. Your child is safe. But if the crocodile plans to keep your child, your prediction is wrong. In this case, the crocodile has no obligation to return them. Everything seems logically consistent because the outcome depends entirely on whether your prediction aligns with the crocodile's intentions. But now, the real paradox begins to unfold. In the second scenario, you predict that the crocodile will not return your child. If the crocodile decides to keep the child, your prediction is correct, but then the crocodile must return the child because your prediction was right. This creates a contradiction, as the crocodile cannot both keep the child and honor its promise to return them. If the crocodile plans to return your child, your prediction is wrong, and by the terms of the deal, the crocodile should not have returned the child in the first place. In both scenarios, the crocodile finds itself caught in a logical contradiction. So, what's really happening here? The Crocodile Paradox is a classic example of a self-referential paradox, where a statement refers to itself in a way that leads to an impossible situation. It's like the famous liar's paradox, where someone says, "This statement is false." If the statement is true, it must be false. But if it's false, it must be true. The Crocodile Paradox operates on the same slippery logic. where the crocodile's promise crumbles under its own weight. But there's more to this than just a puzzle of logic. The Crocodile Paradox also brings forth deeper philosophical questions. At its heart, it's about promises, truth, and trust. If a promise creates a situation where it can't logically be kept, is it really a promise at all? And if a situation is built on contradictory rules, can any outcome be truly fair or just? In a way, this paradox mirrors the complexities we face in life. Legal contracts with hidden loopholes, political promises built on conflicting foundations, or personal dilemmas where every decision seems to lead to an unsatisfactory end. The Crocodile Paradox isn't just a brain teaser. It's a reflection of the imperfections in the promises we make and the expectations we hold. And we can't forget about the crocodile. The paradox also reveals something about power and control. The crocodile isn't just a passive player in this riddle. It is the architect of the trap. By setting the terms in a way that guarantees a contradiction, the crocodile ensures that no answer can fully fulfill the agreement. In a sense, it represents the structures of authority and systems where the rules are designed to maintain control, even when logic and fairness are put to the test. So, can this paradox ever be solved? Philosophers have debated this question for ages, and most would agree. No, it can't. The paradox isn't meant to have a neat resolution. It's not about finding an answer. It's about understanding the limitations of language, logic, and our assumptions about fairness and promises. Perhaps then, the real lesson of the Crocodile Paradox is this. Not every question has a clear answer. Not every problem can be untangled with pure reason. Sometimes the power lies not in solving the puzzle, but in recognizing the trap for what it is. So, if you ever find yourself in front of a crocodile, facing a deal that seems impossible to fulfill, remember this paradox. Sometimes the game is rigged from the start, and the only winning move is to see the paradox for what it is, a carefully constructed trap hidden beneath the illusion of choice. The Friendship Paradox. Take a deep breath and let your body relax. Now picture yourself in a calm, peaceful place, reflecting on something you might have noticed before. Why do your friends seem to have more friends than you? It's not just in your head. It's a real phenomenon known as the Friendship Paradox. This surprising idea suggests that, on average, your friends are more popular than you are. How is that even possible? And what does this reveal about the way we connect, compare ourselves, and navigate our social world? Let's gently dive into the math behind the paradox. Imagine a network, a web of connections that links people together. Some individuals have only a few close friends, while others are social butterflies, connected to dozens or even hundreds of people. The friendship paradox emerges because people with lots of friends are more likely to be your friends. Why? It's simple. If someone has 100 friends, they have 100 chances to be connected to you. But someone with only 2 friends has just 2 chances. In any network, the most connected people act as hubs, creating an imbalance in the average number of friends your friends have. This subtle mathematical quirk means that when you compare yourself to your friends, you're often comparing yourself to those who are more popular than you. And because of this, your friends, on average, will seem to have more connections than you do. But the paradox isn't just about self-perception. It's a reflection of how networks operate in our social lives from small circles to vast online platforms. The friendship paradox goes deeper than just numbers. In our modern world, dominated by social media, it has profound psychological and social implications. When we scroll through platforms like Instagram or Facebook, we often see glimpses of our friends' most exciting moments, vacations, parties, achievements, shared by the people who are most connected. This creates an illusion that everyone else is more popular, more successful, or more interesting than we are. The friendship paradox helps explain why this feeling is so common. We're naturally more exposed to the lives of our most connected friends, amplifying the sense of comparison. This constant comparison can affect our mental health. Research shows that social comparison can be a major contributor to anxiety, envy, and even depression. The friendship paradox reminds us that these comparisons are often based on a distorted view of reality. Your friends may seem more connected, but that's largely because of how networks work, not because you're any less valuable or connected yourself. Interestingly, the friendship paradox isn't just an intellectual curiosity. It has real-world applications, especially in public health. For example, during a disease outbreak, public health officials might target vaccination campaigns or important health messages to the most connected people. These individuals are more likely to influence others, and by focusing on them, helpful information can spread more effectively, while harmful misinformation or diseases can be slowed down. The paradox also shines a light on influence and inequality within networks. In any group, whether it's a circle of friends, a professional community, or a social media platform, connections aren't shared equally. A small number of people often hold a disproportionate amount of influence. The friendship paradox shows us how this inequality affects our perceptions, interactions, and even opportunities in life. But perhaps the most profound lesson of the friendship paradox is what it teaches us about perspective. It reminds us that our view of the world is always partial, shaped by the connections we see. Just like your friends may seem to have more connections than you, your perception of other aspects of life, success, happiness, or wealth, can be shaped by the people you're exposed to. The paradox encourages us to question these views, acknowledge their limitations, and focus on what truly matters in our own lives. The friendship paradox is more than just numbers. It's a reflection of how we relate to others and how networks shape our lives. It challenges us to rethink how we compare ourselves, to see beyond the surface of popularity, and to value the depth and meaning of our relationships. In the end, it's not about how many friends you have. It's about the quality, the trust, and the connections you share with those around you, and no paradox can take that away.
The Tolerance Paradox. Close your eyes, breathe slowly, and feel the gentle weight of your body sinking into relaxation. Imagine a quiet space, free from distractions, where we can explore a thought, a paradox, gently unfolding in your mind. Can a tolerant society remain tolerant if it tolerates intolerance? This is the Tolerance Paradox, a deep and troubling dilemma that was first introduced by philosopher Karl Popper. It challenges the very idea of living in an open, free society. At its heart is a simple yet uncomfortable question. How far should we go in accepting opposing viewpoints, especially when those viewpoints threaten the very foundation of tolerance itself? Now picture a society built on the principle of tolerance, a place where people are free to express their beliefs, live as they choose, and engage in open, respectful dialogue. But then,
an intolerant ideology begins to emerge. One that rejects the values of tolerance and actively works to suppress others' freedoms. What should a tolerant society do in this situation? If it tolerates the intolerant, it risks being overrun by those who reject tolerance altogether. But if it refuses to tolerate the intolerant, has it abandoned its own principle of tolerance? This is the heart of the paradox. Tolerance is often seen as an absolute good, but the tolerance paradox gently reminds us that tolerance has its limits. It forces us to face the difficult truth that, when taken too far, tolerance can become self-destructive. Popper introduced this idea in his 1945 book, The Open Society and Its Enemies. He argued that unlimited tolerance leads to the erosion of tolerance itself. If a society allows intolerant ideologies to take root and spread unchecked, those very ideologies can slowly dismantle the freedoms that made the society tolerant in the first place. Popper's solution was clear, yet controversial. A tolerant society must reserve the right to be intolerant toward intolerance. On the surface, this might sound contradictory. How can a society committed to tolerance justify being intolerant? But Popper's argument isn't about silencing opposing views. It's about drawing a line when those views actively threaten the rights and safety of others. The goal isn't to eliminate conflict, but to protect the very conditions that make a tolerant society possible. The tolerance paradox isn't just a philosophical thought experiment. It has real-world implications. Think about freedom of speech, one of the cornerstones of a tolerant society. Should this freedom extend to those who use it to spread hate speech, incite violence, or advocate for the suppression of others' freedoms? Some believe that even the most offensive ideas should be allowed in the name of free expression, trusting that open debate will expose and discredit harmful views. Others argue that allowing such speech can create an environment where intolerance thrives, ultimately putting vulnerable groups at risk. History offers many examples where the tolerance paradox played out in dramatic ways. In the early 20th century, many democratic nations tolerated the rise of authoritarian movements, thinking they could coexist with democratic values. But in cases like Nazi Germany, that tolerance allowed intolerant ideologies to gain power and dismantle democracy from within. These lessons from history show that unchecked tolerance can lead to devastating consequences. But where do we draw the line? This is where the tolerance paradox becomes especially tricky. Not all forms of intolerance are equally dangerous, and not all disagreements threaten the fabric of society. Disagreeing with someone's political views or cultural practices isn't the same as advocating for their suppression. The challenge is to distinguish between harmful intolerance that needs to be addressed and healthy conflict that should be encouraged. Critics of Popper's idea often raise concerns about who gets to decide what counts as intolerant. They worry that labeling certain ideas or groups as intolerant can be subjective and open to abuse. A government or powerful group could misuse this principle to silence dissent under the guise of protecting tolerance. This highlights the delicate balance society must strike, protecting itself while avoiding authoritarianism. The tolerance paradox also touches on human psychology and group dynamics. Intolerance often arises from fear, ignorance, or a sense of threat. Addressing these underlying causes through education, dialogue, and empathy can be more effective than simply suppressing intolerant ideas. But even these approaches have limits, especially when dealing with ideologies that are fundamentally opposed to dialogue or compromise. In today's polarized world, the tolerance paradox feels more relevant than ever. We see debates over free speech, censorship, and the boundaries of tolerance play out every day, from social media to political arenas. As we navigate these challenges, the paradox reminds us that tolerance isn't just about accepting differences, it's about actively protecting the principles that make peaceful coexistence possible. So, what can we learn from the tolerance paradox? First, it teaches us that tolerance has limits, and that those limits are necessary to preserve the values we hold dear. Second, it challenges us to think critically about how we respond to intolerance. Should we engage in open dialogue? Should we create legal protections? Or, in extreme cases, should we impose restrictions? And lastly, it reminds us that a tolerant society is not a passive one. It requires vigilance, courage, and a willingness to confront difficult questions about freedom, fairness, and justice. The tolerance paradox isn't just a problem to be solved. It's a reflection of the complexities of living in a diverse, open society. It forces us to grapple with the tension between our ideals and the realities of human behavior. Perhaps its greatest lesson is this: tolerance isn't a static principle. It's a dynamic process, one that requires constant effort to uphold. In the end, the paradox doesn't weaken the idea of tolerance, it strengthens it. True tolerance is not about accepting everything. It's about standing firm in defense of what truly matters. And in that, we can find peace. The Paradox of Thrift. Close your eyes and imagine a quiet evening, a world at rest, where every decision, every action gently ripples through the vast, interconnected web of the economy. Now, imagine being told that saving your money, something you've always believed to be wise, responsible, could in fact slow everything down, even harm the economy itself. How could that be? This is the paradox of thrift, an idea that turns our understanding of personal finance upside down. It reveals a contradiction, a delicate balance between what is good for the individual and what is good for the whole. We begin with something simple, something that feels like common sense. Saving is good. When we save, we prepare for the future, for the unknown, for stability. We put money aside, we feel secure. We build a cushion of safety. But in an economy, no action exists in isolation. Every coin saved is a coin unspent, and every coin unspent is one that never reaches the hands of another. Now, picture a small town, its streets quiet, its shops once busy, now empty. The people decide to save. They stop dining out and stop shopping for clothes, they stop planning trips. At first it seems responsible, but then something begins to change. The local cafe struggles to keep its doors open. The tailor stitches fewer suits. The travel agency falls silent. Jobs are lost. Incomes shrink. And as people have less, they spend less. A cycle begins, a quiet spiral, pulling the economy downward. This is the heart of the paradox of thrift. What is rational for one can be harmful when done by all. Economists call this the fallacy of composition, the idea that what benefits an individual does not always benefit the collective. This paradox was first illuminated by the mind of John Maynard Keynes during the Great Depression. He saw the pattern, the way fear led to saving, how saving led to less spending, and how less spending deepened the crisis. And so, Keynes suggested that in times of economic downturn, what the world needs is not less spending, but more. When money flows, demand rises. When demand rises, businesses grow. When businesses grow, jobs are created. And when people have jobs, they feel safe. And when they feel safe, they begin to spend again. But the paradox does not mean saving is bad. In a thriving economy, saving fuels investment, builds industries, powers innovation. The paradox of thrift applies in times of contraction, when sudden saving tightens the economy's breath, deepening a recession. And so, it raises a question. If individuals and businesses hesitate, who can keep the world in motion? Keynes believed the answer was simple. Governments. Through public projects, infrastructure, healthcare, education, governments can send energy back into the system, create jobs, restore movement, rebuild confidence. Of course, not all agree. Some say saving, even in downturns, leads to future growth. Others fear that too much spending, too much intervention, can lead to heavy debts, lingering burdens, instability. These debates whisper through history, threading through every crisis, every decision, each one shaped by a simple truth. Economies are not just numbers, they are people. And people are driven by emotion. Fear tightens our grip. Optimism opens our hands. When we feel secure, we spend. When we fear the unknown, we hold back. And in this delicate dance, the economy rises and falls. The paradox of thrift is not just about money. It is about the silent forces that guide us, the choices we make, the ripples they create, and the unseen ways we are all connected. So now, as you drift deeper into rest, think of how even the smallest decision echoes through the world. Because economics, like life, is never as simple as it seems.
So, what can we learn from the paradox of thrift? It teaches us to pause, to reflect on the delicate dance between personal choices and collective outcomes. What feels responsible, prudent even on an individual level, can ripple outward in ways we might not expect. It reminds us of balance. Saving, spending, both are essential. But their effects shift with time, with context, like the ebb and flow of the tide. And most of all, it reveals the intricate web of connection that we all share. No one acts in isolation. Each decision is a thread woven into the greater fabric of the economy. What we choose, how we move through the world, it shapes not only our own lives, but the lives of others. In a world that so often praises individual responsibility, the paradox of thrift whispers a different lesson, a gentle reminder that true economic health is not just about self-preservation, but about the ways we contribute to something greater. And so the next time you wonder whether to save or to spend, remember, this is more than a personal choice. It is part of a vast, unfolding story. A story of balance, of connection, of the unseen forces that shape our world. Now, let's imagine something else. A world where the safer we try to make things, the more fragile they become. It feels unnatural, doesn't it? But this is the Stability-Instability Paradox, a quiet contradiction where efforts to maintain peace can paradoxically invite conflict. This idea emerged in the Cold War, a time when two great superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, stood locked in an uneasy equilibrium. They held within their grasp weapons powerful enough to end everything. And so a strange, ironic peace settled over the world, a peace maintained by the shadow of destruction. But here is where the paradox deepens. Though nuclear war seemed unthinkable, smaller wars flourished. When full-scale destruction is too costly, the mind begins to explore other avenues. Wars fought not directly, but through distant lands, Vietnam, Korea, Afghanistan, battlefields where great powers moved like ghosts, never facing each other yet always present. And so the paradox reveals itself. Stability at the highest level does not eliminate conflict. It merely reshapes it when the greatest weapons remain unused. Smaller battles may feel almost safe, like distant echoes of a storm that never quite breaks. But this paradox is not a relic of the past. Even now, the same invisible forces are at play. In a world with nuclear-armed states, the doctrine of mutually assured destruction still looms, a silent guardian against total war. And yet, tensions remain. Border disputes, strategic skirmishes, moments where the pressure builds, where the balance wavers, but never quite tips. India and Pakistan, two neighbors, bound by history, by rivalry, by weapons too powerful to use. And yet, their conflicts persist, flickering embers that never quite fade. Because the paradox remains. Stability, at one level, can create instability at another. A quiet contradiction, woven into the nature of power itself. And so, we watch, we listen, and we wonder what shape the next ripple will take.
The Stability-Instability Paradox extends far beyond warfare, revealing itself in unexpected places. Take cybersecurity. As nations and organizations construct stronger, more impenetrable digital defenses, they inadvertently fuel an escalating arms race. The more robust the protection, the more sophisticated the attacks. A cycle emerges where systemic stability breeds tactical instability, forcing constant adaptation, constant vigilance. Economics follows a similar pattern. Regulations designed to stabilize markets can, paradoxically, create conditions for localized crises. When actors perceive safety nets, they take greater risks. Bubbles form, and sometimes they burst. This paradox raises profound questions about the nature of security and power. How do we create systems that are both strong yet flexible? How do we pursue stability without inviting instability? There are no simple answers, but the paradox teaches us an essential lesson: humility in decision-making. It reminds us that every system, whether geopolitical, technological, or economic, is deeply interconnected. Every solution can bring unforeseen consequences. Every effort to control chaos reshapes the forces at play. It challenges us to look beyond the immediate, to see the hidden ripple effects of our actions. In international relations, this means fostering communication, transparency, trust. When nations understand each other's intentions, the risk of miscalculation, of unintended conflict, diminishes. The Stability-Instability Paradox reveals a sobering truth. Peace is not a passive state. It is fragile, dynamic, and easily disrupted. True stability is not the absence of conflict, but a delicate balance that demands constant attention. So, what can we learn? First, we must question the assumption that stability is always good. While it may deter large-scale chaos, it can also create openings for smaller-scale disruptions. Second, we must think critically about the unintended consequences of our actions, especially within complex systems. And finally, we must recognize that true security requires more than deterrence. It demands understanding, adaptability, and a willingness to embrace uncertainty. Because in the end, the Stability-Instability Paradox is more than a theory. It is a way of seeing the world, of understanding the fine line between order and disorder. And perhaps its greatest lesson is that stability itself is never still. It is a process, a movement, a balance that must always be carefully maintained. The Hedonism Paradox. What if the harder you chase happiness, the further away it drifts? This is the Hedonism Paradox, a quiet yet profound contradiction that challenges our deepest beliefs about pleasure, fulfillment, and the nature of a meaningful life. At its core, this paradox whispers a strange truth. When pleasure becomes the ultimate goal, it often slips beyond reach. But why does this happen? And what can it teach us about the true essence of happiness? Let's begin with hedonism. Hedonism is the idea that pleasure is life's highest pursuit, the ultimate good. And at first glance, it makes sense. Who doesn't want to be happy? The warmth of a delicious meal, the melody of a favorite song, the quiet comfort of time spent with loved ones. Pleasure is woven into the human experience. Hedonism suggests that by maximizing these moments, we create the best possible life. But the Hedonism Paradox turns this idea upside down. The more we chase pleasure directly, the more elusive it becomes. Imagine you're at a party, determined to have the best time. You plan every detail, your outfit, your conversations, the perfect drink in your hand, but as the night unfolds, you find yourself watching, measuring, wondering if you're having as much fun as you should, comparing, analyzing, adjusting. And somehow, the joy you expected never quite arrives. This is the Hedonism Paradox in motion. It isn't that pleasure is wrong. It's that grasping for it too tightly makes it slip through your fingers. Happiness is often not something you reach for, but something that unfolds naturally, as a side effect of being present. Psychologists describe this as the paradoxical effect. The more we fixate on an outcome, on happiness itself, the more self-aware we become. And self-awareness, when focused on enjoyment, often brings tension, pressure, even anxiety. Instead of feeling free, we feel watched, even if only by our own minds. Philosophers have explored this paradox for centuries. Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, once wrote, "Happiness cannot be pursued. It must ensue as a result of living a meaningful life." A gentle truth that suggests the most lasting joy does not come from seeking pleasure, but from engaging deeply with something beyond ourselves. Modern psychology echoes this idea. Research shows that those who prioritize purpose, relationships, creativity, often find themselves happier than those who chase pleasure alone. Not because pleasure is unimportant, but because it is best experienced indirectly. Think of a hobby you love: painting, hiking, playing an instrument. When you are lost in the moment, you are not asking, "Am I happy right now?" You are simply being absorbed, present. And in that quiet immersion, joy emerges, unforced, effortless. And so, the Hedonism Paradox offers us a gentle reminder. Pleasure is not something to chase, but something to welcome. A fleeting light that appears when we stop trying to hold it in our hands. The paradox also invites us to reflect on the world we live in. Modern society whispers to us constantly, urging us to seek happiness through possessions, validation, and achievement. Advertisements promise that the right car, the perfect vacation, the latest gadget will bring fulfillment. Social media surrounds us with carefully curated glimpses of seemingly perfect lives, reinforcing the idea that happiness is something to chase, something to display. But the Hedonism Paradox reminds us of a quiet truth. The more we try to grasp happiness, the more elusive it becomes. The pressure to constantly seek pleasure, to measure our worth by how happy we appear, can lead to exhaustion, even emptiness. Perhaps it is time to rethink what it truly means to live a fulfilling life. So, how do we escape this cycle? One way is to shift our focus from external rewards to inner fulfillment. Intrinsic goals like personal growth, deep relationships, creative expression are valuable in themselves. They enrich us from within. Extrinsic goals, money, status, appearance, often seem like paths to happiness, but research shows they can leave us feeling hollow, always reaching, never arriving. Those who prioritize meaning over validation tend to find happiness appearing naturally, unforced. like a quiet sunrise, rather than a distant light they must chase. Another way is to embrace mindfulness, to be fully present, without judgment, without expectation. When we let go of the need to measure our experiences, we open ourselves to simply living them. We savor the taste of a meal, the warmth of the sun, the rhythm of breath. The moment itself becomes enough. The Hedonism Paradox also reminds us to embrace the full spectrum of human emotion. Happiness is just one note in the symphony of life. Joy and sorrow, excitement and stillness, longing and contentment all exist together. By welcoming every feeling, we allow life to unfold as it is, without resistance. And paradoxically, when we stop demanding happiness, we often find it quietly waiting for us in the spaces between. In the end, the Hedonism Paradox is not just a puzzle about pleasure. It is a lesson in how to live. Happiness is not a prize to win or a possession to hold. It is something that finds us in moments of presence, meaning, and connection. The next time you feel the pressure to be happy, remember this. Let go of the chase. Trust the unfolding of each moment and allow joy to find you. Because in the end, happiness is not about where you are going, but how you are traveling. And sometimes the best way to find it is simply to be.
The Sorites Paradox. Imagine a single grain of sand resting quietly in your hand. Just one. Certainly not a heap. Then another grain falls beside it. Still, not a heap. But what if you keep adding more, one at a time, slowly, gently? At what moment does the pile become a heap? This question lies at the heart of the Sorites Paradox, a thought experiment that reveals how simple ideas can unravel into deep, mesmerizing complexity. At first glance, the paradox might seem easy to dismiss. Perhaps a heap is just a vague term without a precise definition. But the moment you ask where the line is drawn, things become less certain. If one grain alone isn't a heap, and adding just one more grain doesn't suddenly transform it, does that mean no amount of grains could ever truly form a heap? A strange thought, isn't it? This slippery slope of reasoning doesn't just apply to sand, but to so many concepts in our world. The word Sorites comes from the Greek soros, meaning heap. And for centuries, philosophers have been captivated by its implications. It isn't just about sand, but about how we define anything that lacks clear boundaries. Consider hair. At what point does a person with thinning hair become bald? Or wealth? How many dollars turn poverty into riches? At first, these questions may seem trivial, but they reveal something profound about the way we use language and the limits of our reasoning. The Sorites Paradox
exposes a hidden truth. Many of the words we rely on are wonderfully, beautifully imprecise. We say heap, bald, rich, not because they have strict measurements, but because they allow us to describe the world in a flexible, intuitive way. But when we push these concepts to their edges, they blur, and suddenly, clarity dissolves into ambiguity. How do we navigate this? One idea is to think in degrees rather than absolutes. Instead of asking whether a pile is or isn't a heap, we might ask how much it resembles one. As grains accumulate, the probability, the perception of heapness gradually increases. But even this approach leaves a lingering question. Where do we draw the line? Another way to approach the paradox is through context. In some settings, a pile of 50 grains might be a heap. On a beach, where dunes rise like golden waves, that same pile might seem minuscule. Context shapes perception, and our definitions shift depending on what surrounds us. But the Sorites Paradox is not just about words. It has real, tangible consequences. Think about laws. Many legal systems rely on vague concepts, reasonable doubt, excessive force. These terms are left flexible to adapt to unique situations. But that very flexibility creates room for interpretation and disagreement. Or consider ethics. At what point does climate change become a crisis? When does economic inequality become too much? These are not just abstract puzzles. They shape the way we understand and respond to the world's most pressing challenges. And perhaps this is the true lesson of the Sorites Paradox. We long for clarity in a world that resists easy definitions. We like to sort things into neat categories. This is, this isn't. But reality is not so simple. The paradox reminds us that uncertainty is not a flaw, but a feature of existence. And maybe, just maybe, that's what makes it so beautiful. Because in the end, the search for absolute answers often leads not to certainty, but to deeper, more meaningful questions. It invites us to embrace the in-between, to sit with the unknown, to let go of rigid boundaries, and drift effortlessly into thought. And now, as you close your eyes and let your mind wander, perhaps you'll dream of a single grain of sand joining another and another, forming something undefined, yet complete. Something soft, shifting, infinite. A heap Or maybe something more. The ship of Theseus. Imagine a ship drifting gently in the harbor, the waves lapping softly against its hull. Over time, the wood begins to wear. A few planks rot, and one by one, they are replaced. A mast, a railing, another plank, until eventually every single piece has been changed. And yet, it still sails, still carries its crew, still looks like the same ship. But is it? This question, known as the ship of Theseus, is one of the most fascinating paradoxes of all time. It doesn't just ask us about ships, it asks us about identity itself. What makes something what it is? Is it the materials, the way it's put together, or something deeper? Picture it now, the ship, gleaming under the sun, every part replaced. If it is not the same ship, then when did it stop being the ship of Theseus? After one plank? After 10? Or only after all of them? Now, let's take this puzzle one step further. Imagine someone collecting all the discarded pieces, the old wood, the original masts, the weathered boards, and rebuilding the ship exactly as it once was. Which one is the real ship of Theseus? The one that has been continuously maintained, or the one carefully reconstructed from its original parts? Or could it be that they are both, in some way, the same ship? This paradox does not have simple answers, only deeper, more intricate questions. It is not just about a ship, but about everything that changes over time. Think about yourself, the cells in your body, constantly dying, regenerating. By the time years have passed, most of the cells you were born with are gone. Are you still the same person? What makes you, you? Is it your memories? Your thoughts? Something invisible that lingers beneath the surface? The ship of Theseus challenges how we think about identity. If you own an old car and replace each part one by one, is it still the same car? Or does something fade with every replacement? For centuries, philosophers have wrestled with these questions. Some say identity is tied to continuity. As long as the ship still sails, as long as it fulfills its purpose, it remains the same. Others argue that identity is tied to the original material. If the old pieces are put back together, then that is the true ship of Theseus. But perhaps identity is not just one thing. Perhaps it is something fluid, shifting, like the tide. And as you close your eyes, drifting between thoughts, let yourself float between what was and what is. Maybe the ship is both, and maybe so are we. But there is another way to look at it. What if identity is not a single fixed thing? What if the ship of Theseus is not one ship or the other, but both? This perspective suggests that identity is not about choosing between either or, but embracing both, and it is fluid, evolving, shaped by perception and by time. The boundaries we draw between what was and what is, between before and now, are they real or are they illusions? The ship of Theseus is not just a thought experiment about a ship. It is a mirror reflecting how we see ourselves. You are not the same person you were years ago. Your thoughts, your beliefs, your experiences have all shifted, changed, transformed. And yet, in some way, you are still you. Or are you a continuation of something deeper, like a river that flows, always moving, but still the same river? This paradox stretches beyond us into the world we live in. Cities replace their streets, their buildings, their people, yet they remain the same places. Languages evolve, words are lost, new ones are born, yet they carry the same voice. Echoing through time, traditions shift, reshape, adapt, yet something lingers, a connection to what came before. So how do we resolve the ship of Theseus? Perhaps we don't. Perhaps we were never meant to. Because like all great paradoxes, its purpose is not to answer, but to awaken, to remind us that identity is not a thing to be held, but a story to be told. Not a destination, but a journey. Not a single moment, but a dance between the past and the future, the old and the new. And maybe that is the beauty of it all. The Catch-22 Paradox. Imagine you're in a place where you need to escape, but the only way out is to prove you're insane. But here's the catch. The very act of trying to escape proves you're sane enough to stay. This is the Catch-22, a paradox that traps you in a loop, a no-win situation where every option seems to cancel itself out. It's not just a logical problem. It's a reflection of bureaucracy, human frustration, and the absurdity of systems that don't seem to make sense. The term Catch-22 comes from Joseph Heller's novel, Catch-22, published in 1961. In the story, it describes a military rule. If a soldier wants to be excused from dangerous missions, they must prove they're insane. But here's the twist. If the soldier applies for an exemption, they show concern for their safety. A rational act, which means they're not insane. And if they don't apply, they're willingly putting themselves in harm's way, which might suggest insanity, but either way, they're stuck. There's no way out. The genius of the catch-22 lies in its circular logic. It creates a loop, a trap that catches anyone who tries to escape. While it began in Heller's book, the catch-22 is something most of us have experienced in real life. Think about job hunting. How many positions require years of experience? But how do you get that experience? When all the jobs that offer it demand it as well? Or applying for credit? You need a credit history to get approved. But how do you build that history without being approved first? These are everyday catch-22s. Situations where the system seems to work against you, no matter which way you turn. What makes the catch-22 so maddening is how it traps you in its circular nature. Every choice leads you back to where you started. It's not just bad luck or a difficult decision. It's the system itself that creates this impossible loop. You're trapped by the very logic that's supposed to help. But the catch-22 isn't just about individual frustration. It's a mirror for larger societal and institutional problems. It shows us how systems that are meant to support us can become self-defeating. Bureaucracies especially are known for creating these paradoxes. Imagine a government agency asking for paperwork you can't get without their approval, or a university requiring prerequisites for a course that can only be fulfilled by taking that very course. The catch-22 speaks to a deeper issue of power and control. In this paradox, the system holds all the cards. The individual is left with no choice but to play by rules that are inherently unfair, often with no one to appeal to. It's a stark reminder of how systems sometimes use logic, not to solve problems, but to maintain authority and keep people trapped. And so, we're left pondering. How do we break free from these paradoxes that seem designed to keep us in place? The catch-22 isn't just a puzzle about rules. It's a reflection of how the world works and how we navigate the systems around us.
Philosophically, the catch-22 challenges the way we think about logic and fairness. Logic is supposed to help us make sense of the world, to bring order, clarity, and understanding. But the catch-22 shows us how, when logic is applied without considering real-world consequences, it can create traps, loops that entangle us. It's a warning about what happens when we let rules take precedence over human needs, over common sense. One reason the catch-22 resonates so deeply is because it's not just a theoretical problem, it's a lived experience for so many of us. From navigating complex bureaucracies to dealing with paradoxical social norms, the catch-22 is a reflection of the absurdities we face every single day. That's why the term has become a cultural touchstone used to describe everything from workplace dilemmas to legal loopholes. But what can we do when we find ourselves stuck in a catch-22? The first step is recognizing it for what it is. Understanding that you're dealing with a self-defeating system can help you navigate it with more clarity. You might not be able to break the loop, but you can find ways to work around it. Maybe that means finding alternative paths, challenging the rules, or seeking help from someone who understands the system better.
The catch-22 also reminds us of the importance of questioning the systems we live in. Why do these paradoxes exist? Are they the result of poor design? Or do they serve a deeper purpose? In many cases, catch-22s persist because they maintain the status quo, keeping things as they are, making it harder for people to challenge authority or break free from the rules. By identifying these paradoxes and calling attention to them, we can push for changes that make systems more fair and more humane. Ultimately, the catch-22 is more than just a frustrating puzzle. It's a reflection of the human condition, a mirror to the tension between individual agency and systemic control, between logic and absurdity. And while it may not always have a solution, the catch-22 teaches us to think critically about the rules we follow and the systems we navigate. So the next time you find yourself stuck in a catch-22, remember, you are not alone. This paradox has been baffling and frustrating people for decades, and it will likely continue to do so. But by understanding it, by seeing the hidden dynamics at play, we might just find a way to turn the system on its head and free ourselves from its grip.
The Grand Hotel Paradox.
Imagine a hotel with an infinite number of rooms. Every single room is occupied, yet somehow the hotel can still accommodate new guests. How is this possible? This is the Grand Hotel Paradox, a thought experiment introduced by the German mathematician David Hilbert. It's one of the most mind-bending ways to understand the concept of infinity. It challenges how we naturally understand numbers and space, forcing us to rethink what infinity really means. Picture the Grand Hotel. Every room has a number, 1, 2, 3, and so on, and all the rooms are filled with guests. A traveler arrives at the front desk and asks for a room. The receptionist smiles and says, "Of course, we have space." But how? If every room is occupied, where will the new guest stay? Here's the trick. The receptionist asks each current guest to move to the next room. The person in room 1 moves to room 2. The person in room 2 moves to room 3, and so on. This frees up room 1, which is now available for the new guest. Even though the hotel was full, it made space without turning anyone away. That's the strange logic of infinity. There's always room for more. But the paradox doesn't stop there. What if a bus arrives carrying an infinite number of new guests? Surely, even an infinite hotel couldn't handle that, right? Yet the Grand Hotel can. This time, the receptionist asks each current guest to move to a room number that's double their current one. The guest in room 1 moves to room 2. The guest in room 2 moves to room 4. The guest in room 3 moves to room 6, and so on. This leaves all the odd-numbered rooms, an infinite number of them, empty and ready for the new arrivals. The hotel accommodates infinity within infinity, a concept that feels impossible, but works perfectly within the rules of mathematics. So, what does this paradox teach us? First, it shows us that infinity isn't just a really large number. It's a completely different kind of quantity. In our everyday lives, numbers are finite. They behave predictably. But infinity breaks those rules. In the Grand Hotel, full doesn't mean no more room. and adding to infinity doesn't make it bigger. It's already infinite. The paradox also highlights the difference between potential infinity and actual infinity. Potential infinity is the idea of a process that could go on forever, like counting numbers. But actual infinity refers to a completed infinite set, like the total number of rooms in the Grand Hotel. Hilbert's thought experiment forces us to confront the strangeness of actual infinity, where our normal understanding of addition, subtraction, and space no longer applies. But there's more. The Grand Hotel Paradox also has profound implications for our understanding of the universe. In physics, for example, infinity appears in theories about the cosmos, black holes, and even the nature of time. Hilbert's paradox reminds us that infinity isn't just a mathematical curiosity. It's a concept that shapes how we understand reality itself. Yet the paradox raises philosophical questions. If infinity behaves so differently from finite numbers, can we ever truly comprehend it? The Grand Hotel feels absurd because it conflicts with our everyday intuition. It shows us that the human mind struggles to grasp infinity, even though it's a central idea in math and science. Infinity, like the hotel, is a place that feels endless, yet filled with mystery. One of the most fascinating aspects of the Grand Hotel Paradox is how it applies to modern mathematics. The paradox is rooted in set theory, a branch of math that explores collections of objects. Mathematicians like Georg Cantor, who pioneered the study of infinity, showed that there are different sizes of infinity. The set of whole numbers, for example, is infinite, but it's smaller than the set of real numbers, which includes fractions and decimals. The Grand Hotel illustrates one of these infinities, known as countable infinity, where you can list all the elements in a sequence, like the rooms in the hotel. The paradox even connects to practical problems like computer science. Algorithms that deal with infinite processes, like searching through massive data sets, often rely on principles similar to the Grand Hotel. By breaking infinite problems into manageable steps, we can apply the logic of Hilbert's Hotel to solve challenges in technology and beyond. But perhaps the most important lesson of the Grand Hotel Paradox is how it challenges us to think differently. Infinity is a concept that defies common sense, but it's also a gateway to deeper understanding. It forces us to question our assumptions and explore ideas that stretch the limits of imagination. The Grand Hotel Paradox may seem like a quirky mathematical puzzle, but it's a profound exploration of the nature of infinity. It shows us that the universe, and even reality itself, is far stranger and more complex than we often realize. In the process, it reminds us that some questions don't have simple answers, but they can still open the door to endless possibilities. Just like infinity, the answers may never come easily, but the journey toward them is what makes the exploration worthwhile. Schrödinger's cat paradox. A cat locked in a box is both alive and dead at the same time. How is that possible? This is the thought experiment at the heart of Schrödinger's cat, one of the most famous paradoxes in physics. It challenges how we understand reality, observation, and the strange rules of the quantum world. But don't worry. No cats were harmed in the making of this paradox. It's not about actual feline cruelty. It's about unraveling the mysteries of existence. The story starts in 1935, when Austrian physicist Erwin Schrödinger devised the experiment to highlight what he saw as the bizarre and unsettling implications of quantum mechanics. Quantum mechanics is the branch of physics that deals with the very small, the particles that make up atoms. At this microscopic level, the rules of reality behave very differently from what we experience in our everyday lives. To explain this, let's set the stage for Schrödinger's cat. Imagine a sealed box containing a cat, a radioactive atom, a Geiger counter, and a vial of poison. The setup works like this. If the radioactive atom decays, the Geiger counter detects it, triggering the release of the poison, which kills the cat. If the atom does not decay, the poison is never released, and the cat remains alive. The twist is that, according to quantum mechanics, the atom exists in a state of superposition. It has both decayed and not decayed at the same time. Because the atom's state determines the fate of the cat too is in a state of superposition, both alive and dead at once. This seems absurd, doesn't it? How can the cat be both alive and dead? Schrödinger's thought experiment wasn't meant to explain quantum mechanics. It was meant to criticize it. He wanted to show how strange and counterintuitive the implications of quantum theory could be when applied to everyday objects. At the heart of the paradox is the idea that in the quantum world, particles don't exist in definite states until they are observed. Before you open the box and check on the cat, it exists in both states simultaneously, alive and dead. The act of observation forces the cat into one state or the other, collapsing the superposition. This idea is known as the Copenhagen interpretation, one of the most widely accepted interpretations of quantum mechanics. It suggests that reality, at the quantum level, isn't fixed until it's observed. In other words, observation creates reality. But Schrödinger's cat forces us to confront just how strange this idea really is. If observation determines reality, then what counts as an observation? Does it have to be a conscious human observer, or could the Geiger counter itself count as an observation? And if observation creates reality, what does that say about the nature of reality itself? The more we explore this paradox, the more we realize that some questions don't have easy answers. It's a reminder that the universe and our understanding of it is far stranger than we often realize. The paradox also raises deep philosophical questions. What does it mean for something to exist in two states at once? In everyday life, things are either one way or the other. A light is on or off. A door is open or closed. But in the quantum world, things can exist in a state of both, rather than either or. This challenges our intuitive understanding of how the world works, forcing us to think in entirely new ways. Schrödinger's cat also highlights the problem of scale in quantum mechanics. At the level of atoms and particles, superposition makes sense, and experiments have shown that it's real. But at the level of cats, people, or planets, things seem to behave differently. This disconnect between the quantum world and the everyday world is one of the biggest unsolved mysteries in physics. How do the strange rules of quantum mechanics give rise to the familiar rules of classical physics? The cat-in-the-box paradox sits at the heart of this question. Interestingly, there are other interpretations of quantum mechanics that offer different explanations. For example, the many worlds interpretation suggests that when you open the box, the universe splits into two. In one universe, the cat is alive. In the other, the cat is dead. In this view, superposition isn't about the cat being both alive and dead in the same universe. It's about the existence of parallel universes where every possible outcome is realized. Another interpretation, known as quantum decoherence, suggests that superposition is disrupted by interaction with the environment. In this view, the cat isn't truly alive and dead at the same time. It's just that our inability to measure the quantum interactions creates the illusion of superposition. These interpretations show that Schrödinger's cat isn't just a paradox. It's a doorway into some of the most profound questions about reality, time, and existence. Schrödinger's cat also has practical implications.
Quantum mechanics isn't just theoretical. It underpins much of modern technology. From semiconductors to quantum computers. Quantum superposition, the very concept behind the cat paradox, is what allows quantum computers to perform calculations far beyond the capabilities of classical machines. Understanding these principles isn't just a philosophical exercise. It's the foundation of technological progress. In the end, Schrödinger's cat is more than just a quirky thought experiment. It's a profound exploration of the mysteries of reality. It challenges us to think beyond our everyday experiences and confront the strange, counterintuitive rules of the quantum world. And perhaps its greatest lesson is that reality, at its deepest level, may be far stranger and more complex than we ever imagined.